The CFL Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sign up with promo code SGPN to get 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Start crushing college football and the NFL with Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. Welcome to the CFL Gambling Podcast. If you're joining us on YouTube or on the podcast and you're saying, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like Colby Dant, that's because it isn't. Colby is traveling across the country. So we thought, traveling across the country with the wife, the kid, the dog, the cat, thought we'd maybe give him some time off and run this recap show without him. But the good news is, we've got an excellent guest on with us. And if you're wondering who you're listening to, that's fair. This is JMark. Colby calls me no turn JMark because he didn't know what a zero turn lawnmower was. You can find me on the X at JMark Football. And I already alluded to the fact that we have a guest. I just found out recently that this guy, he is a CFL fan. If you've checked out Old Fashioned Football, you've seen him on there before. Welcome to the show, Kyle Senra. How you doing, man?
I'm doing spectacular in spite of the mini rant that I had, I think, on Friday night or Saturday night about the Ticats. But yeah, everything's great. Big football fan. So I mean, this time of year at the CFL playoffs are just 2 weeks away. Full into the NFL season, fantasy football. Some leagues are going great, other leagues are going awful. So it's a mix of everything, and it's great. And then there's other sports happening too. NHL's kicking off. I know you guys do a lot for NBA too, and that's kicking off in, I think, today, right? The tip off.
I think so, yeah.
It's sports time. I don't care about baseball, so I'm not even going to mention it.
I also
nothing's important happening there, right?
Right. I don't get into baseball either.
I think Lex Luthor and Dr. Doom are fighting or something. Just two villains, I think, or something like that. Two way too rich villains that have way so much money that
Yeah. I used to be into the NBA, but now there's way too much load management for my taste. Can't do it anymore. But we're talking CFL, and I do love the CFL. But I got to ask, because it seems like it's rare anymore to find CFL fans. So I got to ask, how did you get into the CFL? Was it just looking for more football to watch, or how that come about?
It's funny. I am Canadian, which you think that that's automatically makes him a CFL fan. To be fair, I know a lot of Canadian football fans who don't care about the CFL. So
sure.
Just because I'm Canadian isn't a given that you're necessarily going to be a fan of it. But truthfully, I didn't really grow up a big football fan. I was more really into hockey, played a lot of basketball. But yeah, mostly just watching hockey and curling, typical Canadian. I remember watching the first Super Bowl I watched was Peyton Manning beating the Bears, which, as a Packers fan, I wasn't a football fan, but my grandpa was a Packers fan. So I was automatically a Packers fan before I even loved football. So seeing the Bears lose in the Super Bowl was great. But then that kind of started to get me into football a little more. And a couple of years later, I really did start paying attention to the Grey Cup and watching the CFL. And I remember someone I grew up with, one of his cousins was a kicker in the CFL, Luca Conji. And he was at the time he was with Saskatchewan, but then eventually he signed with Hamilton. And so when I was in the mode where, especially when I went to university, that's where I really got into football, got into fantasy football. That's what I was like, okay, now I'm going to watch the CFL. Now I'm into it and stuff. At that point, he was on the Ticats, and then I'm from Ontario. So for me, Canadian geography, there are 3 CFL teams located in the province. So I'm about honestly equal distance from all of them. So I could have, in theory, chosen any of the 3 teams to be the regional team that I support. But he was on the Hamilton Tiger Cats, so I kind of chose them. I've gone to a Ticats game, and that has cemented for sure my fandom of the Hamilton Ticats forever.
Nice. Very cool. I am also a Hamilton Ticats. I have been into the sport, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. Rod Villagomez, who was hosting the CFL Gambling Podcast at the time, he said, hey, you got to check this out. And I did, and I loved it. I love the differences between the NFL. I love the 3-down football. I mean, it takes, if you haven't watched it before, it takes a while to get used to the rouge and the waggle and all that. but once you've gotten used to it all, I love the pace of the game more. I chose Hamilton because they had James Butler. He was a former Iowa Hawkeye. I live in Iowa and a big Hawkeye fan, and they have the same colors really as Iowa Hawkeyes,
Yeah,
the black and
I've
gold.
seen Iowa Hawkeye posters. Like I know there's the guy from South Harmon, Mike. He's got an Iowa Hawkeyes poster every time. The first time something, oh, Ticats fan. Oh no, Iowa. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I also like the Ticats. While we're on the Ticats, obviously not in the playoffs this year, not going to be playing for the Grey Cup, but they made some changes on their defense. They brought in a defensive coordinator to help out, and that really seemed like it changed their season around. What do you expect for them next year? Do you think that they can keep that momentum going? Because the defense got a lot better. The offense was actually one of the top offenses in terms of yards and points, anyways. But what are your expectations for them?
Yeah, they've been putting up points all year, but they
Yeah.
also led the league in turnovers for the large portion of the season. So while the offense was putting up yards, they were turning the ball over way too much. And when you have a defense that's like they made a lot of changes in the offseason.
Hmm.
So probably my favorite all-time football player, Simone Lawrence,
Yeah.
linebacker for the Ticats for years. And the last few years, you've seen just a tackle machine he is. He can impact the pass rush, and he's decent in coverage for a linebacker as well. But man, what the tackles and it's always one of those things where if you know, if he can bail the team out if they're having a poor performance just by making the plays himself.
Hmm.
Felt like they got too used to that, and Simone's retirement, that's such a big gap to fill. And I
Yeah.
know, I think his specific spot of weak side linebacker, I think like Kyle Wilson ended up playing a lot of that this year, and Kyle
Hmm.
Wilson's pretty good, but he's not Simone Lawrence. Good, like Simone, we're
Yeah.
talking about like maybe the greatest player in the franchise history. Has the franchise record for tackles, has the CFL record for tackles in a game. I don't know if you remember watching that game a few years ago. Again, I believe it was against
Mm-mm.
Winnipeg. That I think back that might have been just a little bit earlier than your fandom started, but right around that time, Simone. I mean, and still even last year, Simone was great. He was one of the best
Yeah.
players on the team. So his absence was huge. But then they also like Dylan Wynn left, and the last couple of years he's been hurt. But man, when Dylan Wynn was a dominant inside defensive tackle, he was a true game wrecker. Kind of like not Aaron Donald. No one's Aaron Donald, but like how Chris Jones and Kenny Clark impacted in the NFL as the
Yeah.
interior guys. Man, like Kenny Clark and Dylan Wynn to me are like my two favorite defensive linemen because oh man, I've seen them just dominate for my team so much. Dylan Wynn gone. Casey Sales now has to be that guy, and Casey Sales is pretty good. I don't think he's as good as Wynn was a couple years ago. So you're losing a bit there. Defensive end's kind of been a problem for a lot of years. But I
Sure.
mean, the entire linebacking core was remade. Jameer Thurman signed, I believe, with Saskatchewan in free agency. So then they're suddenly starting, I think, Wilborn and like they've rotated in that middle linebacker spot a few. Baker's started a few games. So it's been tough to find what the recipe is. So a part of
Yeah.
it was, I think, just getting all these new players to gel. Mark Washington wasn't able to get that done right away. Chris Jones managed to make it happen, but I also don't think it's all just on Chris Jones. I think it's naturally these players got better playing together as well. So I think it might be a little bit of both. The secondary has been fantastic though all season,
Yeah.
really. Richard Leonard, Jamal Peters. That was probably the best move they made all year in terms of like changes to the team. Signing Jamal Peters, just so they don't have to play against him because man, there's so many. Oh, there's another 3 interception game for Jamal Peters against the Ticats. That happened far too often over the last couple of years. So steal from the Argos. That's always great. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think the defense certainly got better as the year went on. As long as they can keep a lot of those pieces that they've gained, all this newfound chemistry they have, you don't want to just lose that in the offseason, right? So I think it's now
Yeah.
they have a better base to start off next season defensively. Who knows offensively? I mean, is Bo coming back? I think that's maybe where there's more questions that are up in the air right now. They've got Powell and Talia Tungavailoa actually
Yeah.
played a little bit this year and looked decent when he was asked to. Really ran the short yardage stuff really well, the red zone stuff. So is one of those two maybe the future options. So I think while stuff got resolved, there's still some big question marks for the Ticats.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Colby talked with June Jones, who has had some part in the Ticats. He knows these quarterbacks. He's a big Powell fan. He thinks that a couple more years he could really take over the league. And as far as Bo Levi, I mean, he's little, as Colby would say, long in the tooth. He's getting older, but it seems like CFL, these older quarterbacks can hang on longer than your NFL leagues. So He might not be done yet. He did look good this year. We're going to get into recapping that game, actually. But before we do, just remember we're on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Head over to Apple or Spotify. Give us a 5-star review. Helps us out a lot. Helps the algorithms. I don't really know what an algorithm is, but I know that it helps it. So let's jump into this game where Hamilton won 42-20 over Calgary. Calgary's defense had no answer for Tim White. They looked very lost at times, though they've looked lost this year at times. What'd you make of this game? And I guess the main question for me, for Calgary anyways, do you think Dave Dickenson is back as their head coach, or do you think he's done?
Yeah, and I wonder if, 'cause I think Dave Dickinson's a really good head coach, but we've seen it in the NFL. As soon as you get those extra responsibilities, if you can't live up to being the GM and head coach, because that's what this was his first year, I believe, as GM and head coach.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it last year? Either way, they've had an
Yeah.
abysmal losing record. They somehow made the playoffs last year at 6-12 because the bottom of the league was just so bad. And Edmonton just didn't know how to actually start their proper quarterback. And we're 0-8. Okay, Trey Ford, now you can start the rest of the season for us. Oh
Right.
man, if we had to start you the whole season, we'd win the playoffs. Huh? Funny how that works. Oh, so you're going to start me the whole year next year? No, we're going to sign McLeod Bethel Thompson. He's going to lose a bunch of games. Edmonton, gotta love Edmonton. More rants on that later. But I think part of the big problem in Calgary, they don't have a good defensive line, and that's been a problem the last couple of years. It's not Wigan. It's not Andrew. I know it's Wigan. Can't remember his first name. He's one of their defensive tackles. I think he's probably their best defensive player on the line.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't consider him necessarily an elite defensive tackle like Anthony Lanier from Saskatchewan, or you mentioned Dylan Wynn was in his prime with the Ticats, or even what Casey Sales is now for the Ticats. I don't think he's quite to that level. And then everyone around him is worse. So it's not a good defensive line.
Yeah.
That's why the last 2 years, both their linebackers, Micah Alway and Cameron Judge, have just been racking up the tackles because every back, it seems, can get to the second level on every single play. So you're forcing those two to make every single tackle. Once again, they were probably the worst run defense this year. The Ticats certainly exploited that, but actually I think what was more shocking this game is how good Bo did against the pass as well. Bo had an incredible game, probably his best game of the year. Didn't turn it over, threw a ton of yards, 5 touchdowns. So the run defense doesn't work. The pass defense has been falling apart. Jake Mayer doesn't look like he's the answer at quarterback. There's so much wrong with this team. So you can't even really blame Dave Dickenson, the coach, but then that goes to Dave Dickenson, the GM.
True.
I think they're going to be patient. This is still the carryover of, I think in the early 90s, Wally Buono was head coach GM. And then eventually former quarterback John Huffnagel he started off as just being the head coach when Buono left, then eventually became the GM. And then his head coach was Dickenson. And then it's been passing the torch between those three. So this is a really long tenure. This is the first time Calgary's missed the playoffs since 2005. So you could also say, up to this point, Dickinson's been incredibly successful. Maybe he's allowed one bad year, but if this repeats again and they miss the playoffs again next year, I think he's for sure gone. So I think the organization will be patient because of the success he had. This is a Grey Cup winning head coach for them. So multiple? Maybe just one. I can't remember. I know Bo won a couple with them, but I can't remember if Dickinson was the head coach in 2014, which unfortunately against the Ticats. Man. Bad memories. But I don't think he's going to get fired this year, but I think that definitely on the hot seat and he's on notice, and he has to make this roster significantly better. And it probably does all start at the quarterback. It's funny. Matthew Schultz started this game. Didn't look great. They brought in Jake Mayer and they just benched him again because, you're not the answer. So it feels like the Jake Mayer era is over. What a victory by the Ticats. Am I allowed to rant?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this was incredible. Probably the best game the Ticats have played all year. Man, don't you just love that after they've been eliminated from the playoffs? Isn't that just the best? Where was this week 1 against this same Calgary team that's, again, the worst team in the league this year that the Ticats actually lost to? There's so many losses early in the year, that 0-5 stretch to start the season. They were 2-9 before they actually started to really put it together. Too many losses in that stretch, and that's what's cost them to where they're basically playing 2 meaningless games at the end of the year. Don't even play spoiler on Calgary. Just beat up on the worst team in the league that cost you a loss earlier in the season. But it's great that Bo's doing this now, a 5,000-yard season. I've heard a lot of talk of, can he be the MOP even on a non-playoff team? like as a Ticats fan, do you think he deserves an MOP nomination, let alone winning it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you don't make the playoffs to consider that for sure. But the way he's been able to perform did surprise me. I will say that. And he has been pretty solid. There have been the turnovers, but I didn't expect him to succeed with this Ticats team like he has. So I could see why his name is in there, but I do think it's hard to consider when you miss the playoffs. Though I do think Hamilton, and spoiler alert for the power rankings that we're going to do at the end of the show, I do think Hamilton's better than one of these playoff teams. I would, even if it was this weekend and they were playing each other, I would bet Hamilton. I think like you said,
it might be the team. They might be playing each other this weekend too. Depends on
yeah,
which team you're talking about. I'm curious for later.
yeah. And like you said, that slow start, when we did our preseason episode, Colby and I, both of us, this was our long shot team to win the Grey Cup, Hamilton, because we thought the defense was there. We thought the offense was going to be able to move the ball. It just started way too slow. Unfortunately, because I think they do have a good roster. Like you said, though, on defense, it took so long to gel. And then you did have the turnovers, though. With the points and the yards in a gunslinger like Bo, you're going to have that.
Naturally. I mean, 5,000 yards, 31 touchdowns. Super.
Yeah.
17 interceptions was a career high. So for a guy that's even been a notorious gunslinger, and okay, the mistakes are there, the turnovers are there sometimes because he takes risks. This was a career high. Like he's never turned it over this much. And
yeah,
unfortunately, a lot of those turnovers did cost him. I think about that week 2 loss to Saskatchewan. I found the perfect gif of this cat that's just like sitting mouth open, and the caption is what did I just see? And it's just like, and it was a perfect impersonation of what I was doing on the couch at that moment for watching the Ticats blow this last minute lead to Saskatchewan. Oh, okay. Oh, they got the 2-point conversion too. Oh, they tied it. Oh, well, at least there's a chance in overtime. Oh, you know what? There's 30 seconds left. Maybe we can get to field goal range and avoid overtime. Oh, no, interception. They're in field goal range. They win it.
yeah.
It went from you're winning to, oh, it could go to overtime to you've lost before overtime in such quick succession that it almost didn't make sense. And like that was definitely an interception that cost the Ticats maybe the season, but certainly that game. Other instances as well of just late turnovers. I don't know, man. The way, because each team has a nominee for most outstanding player.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, if I was to vote, I'd put Jamal Peters as the nominee. And I know defensive players, there's only been one in history to ever win the MOP. I actually think this is the year to do it because maybe I'll save it for the power ranking section. But if I was picking Ticats best player overall, I'd say it's Jamal Peters, and how I believe he led the team in interceptions, really transformed the secondary, and that wasn't the problem with the defense. It was the pressure that they weren't getting from the defensive line. The linebackers weren't making plays like, again, we saw last year with Simone and Jameer Thurman. You get both of those guys. Those are sideline to sideline tacklers that are going to make every play. Losing both of them really hurt. And that's where the results were. But the secondary was great all year, and Jamal Peters shutting opposing receivers down. Yeah, he allowed a touchdown here or there. Even the best corners are going to allow that. I thought for what he gave game in, game out, and the turnovers he was able to create, I thought he was Hamilton's best player. So I'd nominate Jamal Peters, and forget Bo even getting nominated by the team, let alone like being a finalist or winning the award. So that's where I stand. But there has been a lot of hype on Bo for MLP.
Yeah,
I just don't agree with it.
Yeah, I hear you. And then the last thing I'll add, just on Calgary, you kind of touched on it, but I agree that I think Jake Meyer's time as a starting quarterback is done. I think they need to find a different answer if they want to have success. He
does Bo go back to Calgary? I just thought of that.
Right.
Sorry, we made a mistake. We really never should have moved on from you here.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if the Boveralls, as they call them, would look as good for Calgary, but we shall see. You never know what happens. This league does change quickly. Before we get on to the other games, just want to let you know that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Pick'em has one of the biggest menus for all sports: NFL, college football, MLB, MMA, WNBA, NASCAR, and more. And Boostober is upon us, which means you're getting a spooky amount of profit boost and much more. And with NBA tipping off, every NBA Pick'em entry through 1019 through 1027 will be boosted. Sign up using promo code SGPN for a first-time deposit offer, a special pick, and that first-time deposit offer is 50% up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Just use promo code SGPN on UnderdogFantasy.com. Now, you can tell when I do my show, Old Fashioned Football, that Miranda usually reads that ad. I fumbled right through it. She must be far better at it than me. Let's move on to this next game, which honestly was a really weird game. Toronto did win 38-31, but they were up 28-0 in the second, 28-6 at the half. It was 38-6 going into the half. And
Going
I
to the
know
fourth
they
quarter.
took,
One quarter
yeah,
just turned it around.
yeah,
Crazy.
and I know they pulled Chad Kelly, which hopefully I don't offend you here, but I'm contractually obligated to say fuck Chad Kelly every episode. Not a
Yeah.
fan of him. I do not think he should have got another chance, but I guess I've ranted on that enough on this podcast. Not everybody has an uncle that's Jim Kelly that can get him those second chances. But I know they pulled him, but the way Ottawa bounced back, it almost made me feel like maybe Drew Brown was a little bit rusty because they've been starting Jeremiah Masoli as Drew Brown got healthy, and then everything started clicking. Yeah, it was against second team defense. It was a big game because Toronto won home field advantage in the playoffs against Ottawa that we're going to see in a couple weeks. But I wonder if, as a football player, you take that fourth quarter momentum where you almost came back. You got two onside kicks, which it's hard enough to get one. They got two, and you can take that into the playoffs and say, "Hey, we crushed these guys in the fourth. We got everything going. We can do it again." Curious on your take on this one. What'd you think of this game? And do you think was it a true preview of the playoff game we're going to see, or is it all bets off? We don't know what we're going to see.
I would certainly hope it's a preview just because of the close nature of the contest, at least what the final score indicates. But it
Sure.
also shows like with the CFL, with the rules inside the 3-minute warning and the clock stopping kind of no matter what, like it's really difficult to just run out a clock in the CFL. Not like
Yeah.
in the NFL. They make it a lot easier in the NFL to just once you're in the lead to really control the game. In the CFL, you're kind of having to play the full 60 minutes no matter what. So
Yeah.
maybe this was simply just Toronto learning an important lesson. No matter how much we're up, we can't let it slip.
Mm-hmm.
Now, knowing it's a playoff game, that might be they may have not rested Kelly because it was a regular season game. And okay, we're thinking we've got this division or this division semifinal matchup like locked up in terms of us being the host. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
we rest him for that. So I am curious to see like how I'd imagine Toronto's not going to play him next week. I also like what you talked about, like Drew Brown with the rust. Like he and I think he and Justin Hardy missed the previous game. So they
Mm-hmm.
finally got that connection going in the fourth quarter. Do you hold them out because you know they're not 100% for this game? I think they play the Ticats this week, or do you say okay they were rusty, so we don't want that, so they're at least going to start the game and then maybe you bench them at halftime kind of thing. So I'm curious to how Ottawa's going to approach this, and really Toronto. Uh,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
really was the only game that mattered this week, so it was like the game of
Yeah.
the week from that sense because everything else wasn't going to change anything standings wise or team positioning. So uh, yeah, it was going to be touted as a big contest, and certainly the one thing is I think Chad Kelly's had two really good games against Ottawa. He's just kind of
Yeah.
demolished their defense. So even if Ottawa has confidence with offense, they need an answer on defense because it seems like they have not had one with Chad Kelly, and you can't just rely on scoring 20, it was 25 points they scored in the fourth quarter. You can't rely on that every game. So,
Sure.
it's wouldn't be shocking if Toronto scores another 30 to 40 points again in the playoff game. So Ottawa's seems like they need to find answers on defense. They've
Yeah.
got
So
this week to figure that out.
right. So I
Ottawa's the
started.
hottest quarterback right now. It's a good test to go against, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started this season as rooting for Toronto because I don't know, or I can move the right way. They had Brian Scott on their team. I'm a big Brian Scott fan. He was their third string quarterback. I thought he should have gotten a chance over Dukes. Dukes is kind of when you watch him play, he's a little erratic, I feel like. But and he didn't get a shot. He had a cup of coffee with Winnipeg after that. Now he is out of the league looking for his next opportunity. But this Toronto team and Chad Kelly, he started slow when he came back, and I thought, take that, Chad Kelly. But he's really picked it up. The thing that scares me about Toronto is I think they are the best team in the trenches, offensive line and defensive line. They seem to be one of the best teams. They can, and I think that was the problem when Chad Kelly came back. They thought, oh, our gunslinger's back, let's sling it. They should be running Kadeem Carey 10, 15 times a game at least. Kadeem Carey is running the ball very well, and the offensive line is getting good push. So they do scare me going in the playoffs if you are betting against them. I don't want to see Chad Kelly win it. I will be honest. I've been this whole show, like anybody that tunes in, they know I'm so against Chad Kelly. I've gotten DMs about it. Like, why do you hate him? I've already said why, but Yeah, I
How
don't
he
know.
behaves, how he is as a person, just everything about him.
Yeah, right.
Not,
Exactly.
not easy to hate him if you know.
Right. Exactly. But yeah, I think Toronto is going to be, they're going to be a tough team to beat in the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a tough test for Ottawa. I mean, Toronto's kind of had their number the last couple weeks, and it's going to
Yep.
be in Toronto. Not that that crowd is ever really that much of a factor for noise. So, because you're a newer Ticats fan, do you have the ingrained hatred of the Toronto Argos? Because like most Ticats fan, like that is the devil, is the Argos.
Well, they are now. I mean, because they kept a man
Chad Kelly
of
makes it
Chad
so much
Kelly's
easier.
character. Yeah. I mean, I follow Brian Scott on the socials, and I talk with Brian Scott, and he's always out in the community trying to do good. That's the part he loves about his position. Like, hey, I'm kind of at this elevated position that I can go around to these communities, and I can go visit sick kids and talk to them about football and make them feel good, or I can do quarterback camps or do this and that. And so to, oh, let's ship this guy out and cut him because we have Chad Kelly back. Like that type of stuff. I know that wins matter in any professional football league, but that kind of stuff rubs me the wrong way. It really does.
Just
So I
another
have
reason
it
to hate
now.
the Argos now. It's just so
Right.
much easier. But I hate to admit when they do some good things. Like you said, they've got a good offensive line. I thought maybe the move of the offseason was trading Curly Gittins Jr. for Jake Seresna. That
Yeah.
was when I saw that happen. I thought, okay, I get it, Edmonton. Like he's a Canadian receiver. Like those are hard to come by for the ratio. It's great. But you just traded away your best pass rusher. And they had Matthew Betts and
Hmm.
Seresna at one point. That was kind of the one thing that was working with that team. Now you don't have either of them. Worse, you've given Seresna to Toronto, and he's been pretty great for them.
Yeah.
Their run defense is so good that it forces teams to be one dimensional, and he can just get after the pass rusher. I think he's close to the league lead in sacks. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, yeah, that's a move that seems to be paying dividends for Toronto. Now, last year in the playoffs, they kind of got smoked pretty bad by Montreal. Some bad,
Yeah.
and Chad Kelly's play was the reason. Some bad turnovers. That opening drive looked great, and they get in the red zone, throws a pick six,
Yeah.
and then it was
Yep.
just downhill from there. So that I think is the real test. But Toronto can't overlook Ottawa. But they know they've beaten them, so you just keep going into that next game with that same preparation. And yeah, as much as I hate to admit, I think the Argos are going to win. I'd love to see the upset of the for the Red Blacks, just because the Argos suck. But,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he threw 4 interceptions that game. I was rooting for him against him at that time too. So I was happy to see that.
We didn't
Um,
even really know the full truth at that point
no,
either. Like stuff came out
no,
after the season, so
right. And really, I mean, I think he had a chance in college. He had a chance in one of the other leagues. I mean, this is not a
it's in the
first time
NFL.
thing. That's why I
It was
thought
with
it
the
was.
Broncos, I think, and
Yeah. Yeah.
they
That's
said
why I
no, we
thought
want Drew Lock instead. Or
right. Yeah, for sure. Let's recap this last game where BC beat up on Montreal 27-0. Now Fajardo played the first half, then they brought in Davis Alexander. Not sure if that was the plan the whole time or if it was, hey, we're down 17-0. But the biggest story here to me is how good Vernon Adams looked. Now, I'm curious to get your take because Colby and I have said ours. I know Nathan Rourke is this. He's a legend for BC. I mean, he had a great year for them the year that he got injured. He looked like the best player in the league. He did his NFL tours. Now he comes back. I know Vernon Adams was hurt at the time, but Vernon Adams was playing the best football of his life. He was the best quarterback at that time, it seemed like. He wasn't going to be hurt for that long. Once he was healthy, they continued to roll with Rourke. I thought that was a mistake. And I'm curious, like, how it divided the locker room. And Rourke has struggled. He has not looked like the same guy. Uh, and Vernon Adams comes back now. Did they make a mistake by not bringing Adams back as soon as he was healthy?
I don't know if that's the case because I think, like in terms of dividing the locker room, I think a lot of those, maybe some of those players, but a lot of those players would have been on that Lions team a couple years ago and saw the success
True.
they had with Rourke. So, I mean, to be fair, Adams was brought in as the injury replacement for Rourke, so it's kind of funny how that's gone full circle.
Yeah.
From all the talks, it seemed like the locker room just appreciated the fact that now they had two solid quarterbacks. So if your starter
Yeah.
gets hurt, you're not concerned. But yeah, I
True.
think Rourke's first game back looked bad, but then I think it was his second game he crushed Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that because that was early enough there as his tenure this year with them, I think it gave the team confidence. Okay, we can still roll with him until we see otherwise. And then what I think that would allow to do is let Adams not just rush him as soon as he's healthy, but let him get fully healthy and really past the injury, because now he's looked like he's
True.
no effects from it at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they still made the playoffs. I mean, if they had done it sooner, do they have a chance to be first in the West? Maybe. So I think maybe from that perspective, the fact that they're not going to be hosting a playoff game this year. I mean, they do host the Grey Cup, so if they get that far, they get to at least host that. But
Yeah.
I think for them, maybe that's what they're missing out on, is hosting a playoff game. So from that perspective, maybe they regret it. But
Yeah.
if Adams was brought back too soon, could that have also? Now he's struggling, and then you have no confidence in either. So I think you let it go to the point where you were absolutely sure that you had to go with Adams, and then once he showed the results, like, hey, it's back to what it was at the start of the year, where it was looking like, oh man, they're hosting the Grey Cup. They look like the Grey Cup favorite, especially when Winnipeg started 0-4. It was like, oh man, BC's gonna be first in the West.
Yeah. What do you make of this score? Do you think this is a worry for Montreal, or do you think it was more of a like, hey, we got everything locked up, it doesn't matter?
I mean, they've had everything locked up for a month, so it's been really tough to judge Montreal. I mean, Fajardo hasn't been healthy, so like it feels like I think it was the plan all along. They weren't going to have him go out there for that full game. It's down 17-0. That's like not at halftime, and we've seen the CFL how comebacks can happen. If anything, that might have been more of an incentive to keep him in. So like, hey, let's get confidence. But if the fact they pulled him at that point tells me that was always the plan going in. He was going to play half just so that, because they do play next week. So maybe we see something similar where he plays half and then Alexander plays half, because we know they've got the next week off, going straight to the East Final. So I think at this point, just to not let him get too rusty, because just like Adams, he started off the season incredible, and some injuries and injuries to receivers as well. I mean, that's a team that's really dealt with injuries all year. Kudos to their what is their record now? I think are they at 11 wins, 12 wins? Yeah, 12-4, 12-4-1. Like that's a testament to that record, considering the significance of injuries they've had. Tyson Philpott out for the year. Who's one of their starting linebackers injured week 1, out for the season. I believe he tore his Achilles. So like you've got who's been your number 1 receiver this year, one of your best defenders, Stubblefield, I think.
Reggie Stubblefield.
Yeah, he's the linebacker opposite Tyrese Beverett. Like those are some key guys in that defensive formation. I know Marc-Antoine Duquois missed some games this year. He's back, looks like he's healthy, and so you're hoping that Austin Mack, now returning from his stint in the NFL, trying to get on with the Falcons. I guess the way the Falcons are going, okay, maybe you did good without him. They've got a decent trio of receivers there. But I think getting everyone healthy is probably the key for Montreal. But like the balance of health, but not having them rest too long. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of the starters start in this week 21 game. But again, probably just for a half, and then Davis Alexander gets the backups in the second half.
Sure. Yeah, this Montreal team, to be honest, surprised me. I know they won the Grey Cup last year, but I thought that they just got hot at the right time, and maybe it was a little fluky. And I wonder how much they heard that on the offseason, because they just came out firing, and they really haven't seemed to miss a beat. And it's really been impressive to watch, especially like you said, through the injuries and everything. I did not expect them to be this good. I did not expect them to be the first team to wrap up the playoff spot and everything. Did you have these expectations for them? Did you think they were going to be as good as a Grey Cup returning champ, or did you think they were going to falter a little?
I think you're fair to say they got hot at the right time, but only on offense, because for the entire season, that defense was incredible. Probably the best unit from start to finish. But Fajardo really started last year so poorly that they didn't necessarily win a ton of games, and then they went on a tear. I think they won 8 in a row to end the season. They kind of did what the Chiefs did last year. Like, okay, suddenly it all came together. That's when the offense really started clicking, but the defense was there the whole time. And once, like this year, they're the best defense in terms of yards per pass. They've allowed 10.3 yards per pass. The league average is 11.62. Edmonton's down at 13.3 for reference sake. Sorry, Edmonton, just have to throw that in there. But like 10.3 is actually a disappointment. Last year, their yards per pass, like halfway through the year, was something like 4 or 5. It was like the league average was higher than every other team, or was lower than every other team, because they pushed down the average so far that it was Montreal league average, then the other 8 teams. So it really skewed things. But it was like that would have been best in the NFL last year too. So Montreal's pass defense is incredible, still probably the best unit in the league, and that's why maybe I'll call it here. My call for MOP is Tyrese Beverett. He has been the best defensive player for Montreal these past 2 seasons, and they've been arguably the best unit in the CFL, offense, defense, for
Yeah.
these last 2 years. He's incredible. He's their version of Simone Lawrence. He does it all. I mean, tackle machine, but he impacts the pass rush a ton. He's so great in coverage that like he forces turnovers a ton. Like that dude just fills up the stat sheet and just every game consistent. And that's maybe the one guy that has actually remained pretty consistently healthy for Montreal over the past 2 seasons. And I think he's the glue guy that's really kept that whole team together. I think Fajardo probably ultimately ends up being the MOP nominee for probably Montreal and the East Division in general. But I really think it should go to Tyrese Beverette. So this is the pro Beverette who I think has an argument to make that he is the best player in the CFL because he's the best player on the best unit.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, when Fajardo got hurt and Davis Alexander came in for I think 2 or 3 games there mid-season, the offense didn't miss a beat. And if you're talking about a most valuable guy, usually you think that you take a step back if that person exits, and they really didn't. In fact, it seemed like they moved the ball maybe a little better because Davis Alexander's a bit of a wild card with the way he can run. So that was kind of interesting to watch. I have to finally say that I believe in Cody Fajardo is a good quarterback. I did not believe it, back from his Saskatchewan days and everything. I was like, this guy, he can't win multiple Grey Cups. There's no way. But
He
I
looks
do
like
believe he
Philip
can.
Rivers throwing, like shot putting. Like it's a weird looking throwing motion, but it works.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And maybe that's what threw me off to begin with. It was just he doesn't look like your prototypical quarterback when he's throwing, but he gets the job done. He has been getting the job done. We're going to talk about power rankings, and before we do that, I want to kind of get your thought on the Grey Cup here, the team you like. But real quick before we do, just want to let you know that we're brought to you by BetUS, bet with the best in the business. BetUS. BetUS has been around for more than 30 years. Easily deposit using cryptocurrency and get lightning fast payouts. U.S. players are always welcome. Sign up and deposit $100, and you have a chance to win a 1960 Ford Mustang. I would like one of those. Use our link to sign up and get a 125% deposit bonus on your first 3 deposits. Go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/betus. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/betus. Promo code SUPN so they know that we sent you. BetUS, America's favorite sports book. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. SUPN's proud partner Rhythm is the #1 AI-powered sports betting platform that helps provide bettors of all levels the ability to build custom predictive betting models in seconds and get predictions for betting on money lines, spreads, totals, and props. Build your own model, copy one of the top performing models from the leaderboard, or press build a model for me. And Rhythm gives you predictions for every game and player prop. They also have a myriad of stats, research, and trends analysis to give you even more betting insights. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. All right, we are back. I want to get your take. Colby and I have talked about this a little bit before, but who do you think is going to win that 111th Grey Cup?
I mean, right now, I think the favorites still have to be Montreal. They proved it last
Yeah.
year. They've been the best team this year. And right now, they're the only team that has to win 2 games to get to the Grey Cup. Whereas, I mean, one of the West teams will also have that, but the other 4 teams will have to win 3 games. So like their odds just mathematically are the best. And I don't think you can take for granted any win in the CFL, especially the way these 6 playoff teams have looked this year. Ottawa's tailed
Yeah.
down the stretch. Man, their hot start to the season was impressive. But even with that, Montreal still kind of ran away with the East. So it feels like it's Montreal. Their defense is just as good as it was last year. And frankly, feels like the offense overall has been better this year than last year. Maybe not quite to the same extent as it was at the end of the season, the hot stretch into the playoffs and in the playoffs. They certainly started the year that way. They've cooled down a bit. If they can just, we saw them turn it on when they needed to last year. This year, they were so good that they never really felt that urgency or desperation. But I feel like as soon as the playoffs come in, they will. I think they'll be able to turn on this offense. Will get back there. So I'd have to say Montreal is the favorite. And frankly, for who the 2 Grey Cup participants are, it feels like a repeat of last year. I mean, who's picking against Winnipeg? They've been to 4 straight Grey Cups, which that alone, like Collaros became the first quarterback to ever do that.
Yeah.
Edmonton had 5 straight back in the day, but I think Warren Moon was only there for 3 of them, so he started those 3. But the 2 before it wasn't him, so no quarterback has ever started 4 consecutive Grey Cups. Feels like he's going to be the first to start 5 consecutive Grey Cups. The way they started the year was awful, but their turnaround since that 0-4 start, I mean, they've got like 2 losses since then, 3 losses since then. They've gone 10-3 over the past 13 weeks. Feels like they're back to maybe being the best offense in the CFL, and Collaros kind of showing everyone why he's still maybe the best quarterback in the CFL. So I'd
Yeah.
love to see.
Yeah.
That was such a great game last year. I'd love to see a rematch.
Yeah, for sure.
As long as it's not the Argos.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, I think it's I mean, we've talked about it on the show before. Winnipeg just has a winning DNA, right? And sometimes that's all you need. They have the coaching in place. They have Claros, who's done it all. Sometimes that winning DNA is just what you need to be able to get to these big moments. And I agree with you. They're my favorite right now. A couple weeks, I think 4 or 5 weeks, when they were right in the middle of this hot streak they've had, I said I think it's hard to pick against them now. Their offensive line does still concern me some, especially because Claros does not avoid pressure very well. But I still think that the offensive line has gotten better, especially from the beginning of the season. I didn't think he was going to make it through the season the way it started, but it's definitely gelled
36-year-old
better.
quarterback. Yeah, like he used
Yeah.
to be really mobile. Like we remember with him with the Ticats fairly
Hmm.
fondly. But yeah, he's not quite the same athlete as he once was. A little
And
tougher
then
at the age.
you commented on Edmonton with their 5 straight appearances. Now, if you haven't listened before, Colby Dant will tell you that they will never get back there until they change their name back. He is pushing for that name change to come back. Don't think it's going to happen. But also, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show, it's probably glad he's traveling because Colby went 6-0. He hit his big parlay that he gave out on the podcast, so he didn't miss on a total. He didn't miss on a spread. Probably good that he wasn't on the show because we would have heard a lot about that, and I would have heard a lot about that. So I'm glad that he is traveling, and hopefully he's having safe travels now. But yeah, Montreal and Winnipeg would be a great game to see again. And I just have to lean Winnipeg's way just because of that DNA. And even though I just praised Cody Fajardo, I can't give him 2 in a row. I just can't do it.
That's fair.
Yeah, well, but we'll see. So let's talk about our power rankings. We'll start at number 9. I'm curious because everybody's been hearing Colby and I's, and there are some spots that we really disagree on, where he thinks I'm wrong. I think he's wrong. So we'll see kind of where yours align. Why don't you go ahead and start with the worst team in the league? And I assume we have the same here, but let's hear what you got.
I'd assume we have the same bottom two. It's tough to pick against them because they've been so bad, but I think Calgary's the worst team in the league. I mean,
Yeah,
they are in the standings, so like the wins and losses, you can just go as simply as that. It's another poor season for them, but yeah, they don't have the answer at quarterback. As mentioned, the defensive line might be the worst defensive line in the league. You could also argue Edmonton as well in that. And the run defense was, I believe, the worst. Like they believe they allowed the most. Yeah, yards per run, they allowed 6.68. The next lowest actually is Montreal at 5.73. That is kind of the one weakness of Montreal's defense. But
yeah,
it's such a disparity. They're allowing, what is it, I think 129 rush yards per game. I mean, the league average
yeah,
is just barely over 100. So, and you've got a couple teams that are like allowing less than 80 yards per game. So Calgary just the pass defense isn't good enough to make up for how bad the run defense is. So you could say it's the worst defense in the league. It's operating like the worst offense. I believe now they've passed Hamilton for most turnovers. So
hmm
I don't see any. Reggie Bagleton's a great receiver. Would have still loved him to
yeah,
be in the Packers, but I mean, now the Packers receiving core is deep enough that's okay. I can understand at this point. A couple of years ago, that wasn't the case. Rodgers'
right,
last couple of years, it's like, why is Bagleton not on this team? Why is he
yeah,
coaching the Ticats in the CFL, pissing me off as a Ticats fan, and then pissing me off as a Packers fan for not being there? That was some not so fun couple of games there. Um,
yeah, for
but
sure.
yeah, Bagleton's still great, but he's like their only really good player. I mean,
Yeah,
the linebackers, Mike Holloway and Cameron Judge, like those are probably the three best players on the team. Not enough to not make them the worst team.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Calgary, worst team. They have a lot of questions to answer on the offseason. See what they do at the quarterback spot. I think that's where it starts, and see if they do make a change at their coaching slash GM spots. For number 8, I'll go ahead and lead on this one. I have Edmonton. I think they had some spark here and there, but they just couldn't put enough good games together. They looked okay here and there, but just not enough good games. And their defense never really seemed to improve any. I'm assuming you have Edmonton as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just to, like be argue the two worst defenses in the league now. They've got two quarterbacks. Like Calgary would love to have either of Edmonton's
right.
quarterbacks. McLeod Bethel Thompson, it was kind of like Bo. Man, he put up good yards. He looked good in losses, but turnovers were still kind of an issue for him.
Yeah,
It just their record the last two seasons with and without Trey Ford makes you think if Trey Ford had started every game, they'd certainly have been in the playoffs last year. When Calgary made it at 6-12, I guarantee Trey Ford's winning more than 6 games over a full season last year. He won
Yeah.
4 games in half a season. So I feel like if you gave him those other 8 starts, he was going to get at least 2 other wins. So I think for sure they make the playoffs last year. Way Ford played when he came in, they won games. Like that was the one thing that Bethel Thompson couldn't do. He looked good, he passed well, but he wasn't winning games. Ford was. And makes me wonder if this is a lot tighter of a playoff race. If BC isn't so comfortable at 9-9, knowing that they're guaranteed the playoffs, if Edmonton would have made this a lot more interesting if Trey Ford had just started. So I think going forward, Edmonton needs to figure out, okay, if Trey Ford's the guy, he has to be the guy. No more bringing in Bo, or I don't know, Bo, or bringing in McLeod Bethel Thompson. Definitely don't ever start Jared Dogie over Trey Ford. Like that, there's no excuse for that. I mean, the Taylor Cornelius thing was also, they're never walking Cornelius Street again. As if Jake Mayer and Taylor Cornelius, because they changed the rules a couple years ago in the CBA for, okay, if you're re-signing with a team, you could get guaranteed money up to 3 years away. And Taylor Cornelius and Jake Mayer were the first 2 to sign those types of contracts. And then it's like, man, this was a mistake.
Right.
Other players have since signed, like, oh, these are better players. That makes way more sense. I don't know why you had to single those guys. Like, you just had to sign Cornelius to that big extension for no reason. He didn't even make the team this year. And it's like, I'm pretty sure they still have to pay him next year. And he's already not on the team. So what a disaster. Like, if Trey Ford's the guy, making the guy. And I think that'll give clarity. The whole team will know it. There won't be this divide in the locker room. And then you can focus on actually figuring out the defense. Because right now, it feels like they've spent so much of the year trying to figure things out at quarterback. They fired Chris Jones. I don't know if, who was it? It was Darius Jackson, I think, was the interim head coach, former CFL quarterback.
Yeah.
I don't know if he did well enough to convince them that he's going to go from interim to get the main job. So figure out what you're doing with Trey Ford and figure out your coach. Those are the 2 biggest priorities. But they need to fix the defense, and they have to have the other 2 things set, I think, before. So there's a lot to do for Edmonton, but at least if they want to go with Ford, they at least have that answer, whereas Calgary doesn't. So even for this season power rankings or looking forward, I think you'd still rather be in Edmonton shoes.
Yeah, for sure. Now this is where I think it gets interesting, because I think the top 3 teams, for me anyways, are very close, and then 4 through 7, it seems like they're all kind of interchangeable. I'm a little bullish on some teams more, but who do you got at number 7?
See, I think my 4th team is close enough too. So I don't know where we also cut off might be interesting too.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just going by the results and saying, okay, the 3 teams that missed the playoffs, how are they not the 3 bottom teams? Maybe this is just a bitter Ticats fan that's, oh, they finally showed up last week. Oh, maybe I should raise them up because they look good. No, it was a meaningless game. It doesn't matter that they look good to me. Like they're one of the 3 worst teams this year. So Hamilton Ticats to me are at 7. If they wanted to not blow that game against Saskatchewan, there was another game against Ottawa and they lost in the last minute. There's an overtime loss to Winnipeg. I'm getting really tired of overtime losses to Winnipeg. Like those are 3 games that they should have won, and not to mention losing week 1 to the worst team in the league, which we agree with in our power rankings of Calgary. Like those are 4 losses that really should have been wins, and if they are, they're in the playoffs. But you know what? They lost those games, so they're number 7 to me. Oh, lucky number 7. Lucky me being a Titan. I mean, to be fair, it's like I talk about Calgary not. It's been a while since Hamilton's last missed the playoffs. So that's 2016? Maybe? I think that was the year after Claros tore his ACL, and I felt Masoli did okay, but not enough to get him there. It's been a while. Like we've been used to at least them making the playoffs, even if it's just to get blown out in the East semifinal, but at least make the playoffs. So disappointing season all around for not to be in the playoffs. So as a bitter Ticats fan, I'm running with my emotions and I can't rank them any higher than this.
Well,
I'm curious
fair.
At number 7.
So I don't have Hamilton. I have them 1 spot ahead of this team. I'm just not sold on this team. And I know that this may be an unpopular opinion, but the Saskatchewan Roughriders, I think Corey May started the season coaching them very well. And then it was like they just couldn't get out of their own way. They kept losing close games. And I think there's something to be said about teams that just can't find a way to win. They've picked it up a little bit. They've won, I think, 2 since then, but they went on this massive losing streak. And part of it, I think, was the quarterback change. I don't know if they should have made that quarterback change once Harris was healthy. I don't think I agreed with the move. Their defense is really good. Don't get me wrong. I think their defense is good, but I don't know if they're going to be able to push anybody around. So yeah, I got the Rough Riders down at 7. I know I got some shit for that last week, but I'm keeping them there.
Oh man, Saskatchewan fans, they love their team more than anything. They're coming after
Right.
you, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I got them at number 7, and then I'll jump to number 6 because you already talked about Hamilton. I have Hamilton at 6. I think they are a better team than Saskatchewan. I think if those two faced off this weekend, they would win. I think if it was in the playoffs, I would take Hamilton. So I do have Hamilton just a little bit higher. Maybe it's just because I want them to be better. I don't know. We both Colby and I both had a futures ticket on them, and after like the first 5 weeks, we said this is cooked. And then they gave us a little bit of hope. We're like, wait a
Yep.
minute, they could make it. They're coming on strong. They could make it. And then of course they did not make the playoffs, so no hope for it now. But they kept us stringing along for a while. So who do you got at number 6?
This is funny. This is the team I thought you were going to put at 7, actually, and it's the Ottawa Redblacks.
Okay.
Drew Brown, like he was a total unknown. Like Winnipeg's backup the last couple of years. Like it was a big risk for Ottawa to say, okay, he's going to be our guy. We're going to go pay big money to get him. I feel like in the balance of the season, he's done pretty well. I mean, he's got them to the playoffs. He's accomplished the goal that they set out. Like that's been a miserable team the last few years. I think it's been since 2017 that they've won more than 4 games. So they went from Super Bowl Grey Cup winner to 4-win team like overnight, essentially, when Henry Burris retired.
Yeah.
Trevor Harris, they're involved there too. But Drew Brown, I think, really has changed things, and that was getting the consistency at quarterback. I mean, it's not Masoli's fault. He's played before this, like I think 4 games over the last 2 years. Like that was supposed to be their guy.
Yeah.
We've seen him. I mean, we've seen it in Hamilton. He can lead a team to the Grey Cup. Really close to winning it. Oh, overtime loss to Winnipeg. Damn it. But when he's hurt, he's not there. You weren't winning games. They didn't seem to, Dustin Crum came in. He had the Crumback kid last year. That was a fun story. But ultimately, outside of those first couple games that he won, Hamilton. They lost to Hamilton when both threw 5 interceptions. I still don't know how Hamilton won that game last year, but that really started now Crum suddenly lost almost every start he played afterwards. So
yeah,
they've had little bits of spark over the last couple of years. The way they started this season with Drew Brown, you could tell, okay, they have full confidence in their quarterback, full confidence in the coach. A lot of people talk about Bob Dice being on the hot seat entering this year. I mean, that talk is done. I mean, he's made the playoffs.
Yeah.
This is his job for the next couple of years, and I'm happy for him. I love when the special teams guys get the job. It's not just hot new offensive coordinator. Let the special teams coordinators be head coaches. That's great. I love Bob Dice for that. And, I like Ottawa, but their defense really isn't that great. I think they've solved the offense, which you found the quarterback. That's the hardest thing to do. Now you got to really focus on the defense a little bit. Like Edmonton, maybe not as that extreme. Their defense is a little better than Edmonton's. They've got some good pieces. Lorenzo Malden, most outstanding defensive player a couple of years ago. Honestly, he made a case for it this year. Got a lot better against the run. Made a ton of tackles and was still producing sacks.
Yeah.
I mean, their test is Toronto. Like that's the one team that, in my mind, is keeping them from being any higher than we're at 6th now. Because they keep losing to them. And there's one team I guess we do have a big difference of opinion on.
Yeah. I have them just one spot higher at 5. Maybe I have some love for them because the former host of this, Rod Villagomez, is a huge Ottawa Red Black fan. He used to host the Wood Cookie Sawcast podcast. And he's the one that got me into the CFL and hyped the Ottawa. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to pick that team, but I'm happy for you. No, I love.
If you had in 2016, 2017, that would have been a great choice.
Right.
When you joined on the scene, though, 2018, 2019, good choice to avoid them. They have
right. Yeah. I'm encouraged by everything they've done, kind of like you pointed out. I'm encouraged by the fact that they're finally winning home games. This is a team that couldn't win a home game to save their life, it felt like. And they're finally winning some. And I do think they've answered at quarterback. Now it seems like their defense kind of kept them in conversations of maybe this team could do okay in the past years. This year, not the same, but I do think that they are a team that will be, a force to reckon with, at least going forward. But I do have them at number 5. They can't, like you said, they can't seem to get past Toronto. And if you can't get past Toronto, you're not going to win a playoff game because that's who you play in Toronto. So that's going to be a struggle for them. But I do like what they've done with with everything. Who do you have at number 5?
So I do have Toronto. I hate the Argos. I'd love to put them lower, but I'd love to put them behind Ottawa. But again, until Ottawa proves that they can be better than them, And it came close, only a 7-point loss, even if you're losing by like 30 and going into the fourth quarter. So good resiliency from Ottawa. But yeah, Toronto, I mean, they were the Grey Cup champs 2 years ago. They've won a Grey Cup more recently than Winnipeg has. So just we love talking up Winnipeg.
True.
Sorry, Winnipeg. I hate the Argos. I really wanted Winnipeg to win that game, to be honest. Well, if they're going to beat the Ticats 2 in a row, may as well make it 3 in a row and beat the Argos. Nope, couldn't have any of those games go the right way. Thanks, Winnipeg. But yeah, you said it earlier. Their offensive line. I mean, I believe they have the reigning most outstanding offensive lineman. Their right tackle. I forget his first name, but Allen is his last name.
Mm-hmm.
He's still spectacular. That whole line's really solid. The defensive line got even better again with the addition of Jake Ceresna. So
yeah,
football's one in the trenches. They're one of the 2 best run defenses. I just hate them more than the other team that's a good run defense, which is why I've gone with them at 4 and Toronto at 5. That's where the Ticats bias comes into play because you have Toronto higher than 5, which I'm guessing there might be the next team we're talking about
here. They're not. So last week, Colby gave me a lot of shit, but I put Toronto as number 1 because they are just everything seems to be clicking right now, and they seem to be the team that I think they could beat any team in this league. Unfortunately, Colby's been saying that for a while. I have been against it just because of my hatred for Chad Kelly. But I don't. After I see them win this game and that game and this game, it's hard to argue with it. I mean, they have been just peaking and peaking. I think they're going to be able to beat Ottawa, so they're going to be playing for a chance to get into the Grey Cup. It's going to be interesting to see what they have. I actually have BC at number 4. I like BC's offense. I think Vernon Adams is the quarterback they should have starting for them. Their defense, even though it did great this weekend, I have questions about it now and then. They kind of play finesse ball sometimes, and that doesn't always last in the playoffs. It feels like, but I do have BC there. Who do you got at number 4?
So I have Saskatchewan here. I guess this probably does make it the biggest difference in our power rankings. Like Toronto, to me, these are the 2 best run defenses, and it's like the defensive lines really control it. And they don't. I mean, they've got Saskatchewan's got some really good linebackers, like Jameer Thurman, stolen from Hamilton. Who else they have back there? Oh no, Sankey's not there anymore. Anyway, Thurman's like their big tackler in the middle, but he doesn't. He's not asked to do so much because the defensive line dominates. Anthony Lanier is probably the best interior defensive lineman in the CFL.
Mm-hmm.
I think that forces teams to be really one-dimensional. It just like Toronto. I just don't hate Saskatchewan like I hate Toronto, so I'm putting them ahead. You see, I guess the one thing that shocked me is that you didn't think it was a good idea to bring Trevor Harris back. I don't know. I thought, for better or worse, he is a Grey Cup champion, even if he was the backup the year they won it. We've also seen him as a starter lead a team to a Grey Cup. So we've seen Harris have success.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like he's gotten the most out of this receiving core as well. And it's funny because they actually won the first couple games without him.
Yeah.
The losing streak kind of started in the middle of that. I'm trying to think of who they had as backup. I can't think.
Shea Patterson.
Right, Shea Patterson.
And it was really weird to see Shea Patterson succeed. I have not thought he's been a very good court. Like, he seems to get worse at every level. I mean, he went to Michigan and it seemed like he got worse. And then he played in the USFL and it seemed like he got worse. And then in the CFL, all of a sudden he looked okay. I thought that I know that he ended up losing some games, but the way they started, I just thought that everything was going well, that they should have just kept him in there for the fluidity of it all.
Fair enough. I think the team, though, they recognize Harris as the guy. Like, he's won in the league. Again, I think he's got 2 Grey Cups actually as backups. I think he was on Toronto's 2012 team as a backup. So he's got multiple championships. Even if, again, he wasn't the starter on any of those, but we've also seen him have success as a starter in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like that's who the locker room really believes in. So it seemed like that was one where they weren't even going to consider the decision. It was always just going to be Trevor Harris's job. And I mean, struggles when he came back, but it looks like he's got back into his rhythm, fully healthy now. So I'm willing to trust him just as much as I trust Chad Kelly, to be honest. So defenses are both pretty good. So it's a close toss up there. But again, maybe that's just my Ticats bias and the hatred for the Argos showing. But
sure. Well, so like I said, I had Toronto number 1 last week. I felt really dirty about it, took a shower, bumped him down to 3 this week.
Yeah.
So I have him at number 3. I still, like I said, I think they have the best offensive and defensive lines. I think that they could beat any team in the league, and that scares me as somebody who does not want them to win. But and credit to Chad Kelly, he's got that offense performing well. I think Kadeem Carey is a hell of a running back. I think he's one of the better running backs in the league, but maybe that is just a product of the offensive line being so good.
To
So
be
yeah,
fair,
I
he
got
was pretty
Toronto.
good in Calgary too. And I mean,
Yeah,
they also, when he was there, they were a better team with a stronger offensive line. But
special part
just,
in my heart because he was part of the Chicago Bears for about 3 years.
I
So
definitely remember one year handcuffing him. I drafted Matt Forte. Okay, I'm going to draft
yeah,
Kadeem Carey as a handcuff. I don't think that really
yeah,
worked out. But then as soon as he signed with Calgary, it's like, okay, I know him. And yeah,
yeah,
he's had tremendous success since he's been in the CFL. Great running back.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, I got Toronto at number 3. Who do you got at number 3?
So I got the BC Lions. And
Yeah,
I honestly think if you just look at the games that Vernon Adams has started, it almost feels like they should be higher. I mean, they're a
yeah,
500 team. They're 9-9, but how much of that, like Vernon Adams' record, I think is something like 6-2.
hmm,
He's won them a lot of games, and he's looked really good doing it. At times, looked like the best quarterback in the CFL.
yeah,
Their O
agreed.
line might be the worst of all the playoff teams. That's the one issue. Luckily, I mean, either quarterback is pretty mobile, whether it's Adams or Vork. Like part of their skill sets is avoiding pass rush. So those also are two quarterbacks that can kind of make it work behind a not so great offensive line. Really, that's the biggest weakness on the team. I mean, like Stanback's a great running back,
Hmm.
just one of those elite tier guys, arguably maybe the best running back in the CFL, right alongside Kadeem Carey.
Yeah,
And tons of great weapons. Justin McInnis is really,
yeah,
I'd argue he's the best receiver in the CFL, and it kind of came out of nowhere. But his connection with Adams is super strong. So I look for them to really be a challenge, even if they're going to have to go on the road throughout the playoffs, and then eventually rewarded with a potential home Grey Cup appearance. But
yeah.
I have, other than the two teams that I think it's no shocker who 1 and 2 are currently the top two at the standings, the two teams that went to the Grey Cup last year. Outside of those teams just being so good, especially Winnipeg for so long, BC would be higher, but I think of everyone else, that's I think the team I have the most confidence in, because I think right now Vernon Adams is the quarterback I have the most confidence in.
Yeah. Yeah, and if they can just, motivate everybody by the fact of like, "Hey, we could be playing at home. We could play this Grey Cup at home, guys." I mean, that should be great motivation in itself. It was one of the reasons that I was kinda high on them in preseason because I thought they had a talented, roster, and it's like, if you know that at the end of the year, we could be playing a Grey Cup at home, that's, I think, a huge mental aspect of it. So yeah, I like that. I'm gonna let you lead on 1 and 2. 1 and 2 for me, they almost can be flipped, but
I think
who you
this is
got?
the hardest decision, to be honest. I
Yeah.
think there's arguments to be made. I think with respect to their record and the fact that they're defending champs, I'm going to go Winnipeg at number 2.
Mhm.
But it, again, like Caleros could be the best quarterback in the league, and it feels like they probably do have the best overall offense. It's the mix of everything. They've got the solid run game in the O line, like Toronto does. Maybe their O line's been a little bit injured this year, so maybe not quite to
Yeah.
Toronto's extent, but certainly looks like a better offensive line than what BC has. Brady Oliveira, maybe he's the best running back in the CFL. And he's right up there, I
Yeah.
think, with Stanback and Carey. And even though he missed games, I'm pretty sure he's running away with the rushing yards. Like it's
Mhm.
not even like Stanback's played already his full season. Like BC's on bye this week, and he's still like I think 200 yards behind Brady Oliveira, who missed I think 2 games. So
Yeah.
like just how effective he's been. The touchdowns weren't there, but it's because Chris Streveler was there vulturing them all. Now, since
True.
I think he had 0 touchdowns when Streveler suffered that knee-ending injury, and in the 6 games since he has 5. So we also know Oliveira, in spite of the early season struggles to find the end zone, we know he's capable of doing that. So it's when you've got Caleros there with the Kenny Lawler and Dembski and Ontario Wilson really came on strong this year.
Yeah. He's looked
They keep
good.
finding gems at receiver. It's probably the best overall offense in the CFL. Defense still pretty good too. They've got a lot of good pieces in the secondary. Man, Willie Jefferson, like he hasn't been that dominant this year. Still, the sack totals really aren't there. He's still knocking down passes every game. I mean, that's
Yeah.
leading the league in knockdowns, of course, every year. He's the kind of player that if he can take over a game, and he might still be the best defensive end in the CFL. Honestly, we haven't seen it from him this year, but we know that it's there. We saw it a lot last year and into the playoffs, especially. So all it takes is for him to decide to just wreck a game, and he can take it over. So the respect
Yeah.
to Winnipeg there, but I still don't think they have the best defense in the league. So best
Yeah.
offense possibly, but not best defense. So I'll keep them at 2.
Yeah. No, I think you make a great case. I actually have them flipped. I do have Montreal 2, Winnipeg 1. And I mean, this is like a 1A, 1B, really. These teams are both excellent. I do think they're the two best teams. My only, I guess, justification is game on the line. Which quarterback am I trusting to win it? Zach Claros or Cody Fajardo? I know Fajardo's done it before, but I think Claros just has that more experience and that winning DNA. So I do have them at 1. Montreal at 2, but it's so close, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this shakes out. Montreal's your number 1 team. What would you like to add about them?
Well, I mean, I think you make a fair point because we saw Fajardo game on the line last year in the Grey Cup. He led the winning drive, made a couple of really nice throws on that drive, some of the best throws he'd made all year. So we know he is capable, but even knowing that, if you told me I could get one of those quarterbacks, I'd choose Collaros.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the Ticats bias. Love to see him back in green, in black and gold, to be honest. But I mean, yeah, definitely over Bo right now, to be honest. Sorry, Bo. I'll take Collaros. But yeah, I think this Montreal defense, though, they are for real. That's been like just the most consistent unit, especially the pass defense. The last 2 seasons, I don't think anything parallels them. In spite of all the great quarterback play, yeah, we saw Vernon Adams just have a really good game against them. But again, they're in. We've got everything locked up mode. Nothing matters. I know they say, oh, there's no such thing as a meaningless game, but they're not trying. They're not going to go out there and get hurt for the sake of trying to win a game. Come playoff time, I think they flip it. Just like they flipped it last year when they were after their tough start and they went and won 8 straight games. They really like flipped the script and changed things. So apparently Kirkland disagrees with us based on how this year has gone. Like, if you tell me who's the best quarterback of this season, just looking back, I'd say it has to be Fajardo. Again, I still think Tyrese Beverett should be the MOP, but I kind of get the sense Fajardo is going to win it. I think he has been the best quarterback this year, but again, career overall, 4 straight Grey Cup appearances from Collaros. I'd take Collaros, but again, to me, it's the Montreal defense. They've been such an impressive unit, pass defense wise, for the last 2 years. And that hasn't gone away. So I think that counts for so much. In a league with so many great quarterbacks, if you can truly have the best pass defense, that goes a long way, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. One other point, I guess, that kind of goes against how I have them ranked is 1 and 2. If both these quarterbacks get hurt, I trust Montreal's depth better than Winnipeg's now that Streveler's hurt. I trust Davis Alexander a lot more.
Sure.
But going with starters, I do like Claros. Rod Z saying bet against Winnipeg after allowing 14 points or less in 2 straight games. So yeah, it's
that's almost crazy that they've had 6 different occasions where they've allowed 14 points or less in 2 straight games. Like, to even just like, and then to have an 0-6 record sucks.
Right.
To have that happen 6 times is actually pretty incredible. That's my takeaway from that.
True.
This Winnipeg defense is still legit. So it totally justifies, I think, putting them at number 1. Again, I think that, to me, that was the hardest decision, was who was 1 and who was 2. I felt everyone else kind of, once I thought about it all, felt they were in their place. Obviously, we disagreed on some of them.
Yeah.
One of the things we agreed on was Montreal 1 and Winnipeg 2, but what that order was changed up. So important, number 1 in the power rankings, right? It's a tough decision.
Yeah. Absolutely. We will be back at 11:30, or I will, with Rod Villagomez tomorrow to make some picks and DFS and all that stuff. But make sure you follow Kyle at Senra Says. And Kyle, let everybody know. I know you got a lot going on there. Let us know what you got going on, what they can find when they follow you.
Yeah, so I'm with a couple of, 4 different websites right now. Full Press Coverage, that's where, for fantasy football perspective, that's where you can find my fantasy football rankings every week on fullpresscoverage.com. I also have a couple podcasts with Full Press Coverage. I got the Full Press Fantasy Pod and the Full Press Packers Pod. So the Fantasy Pod, it's in season, just a weekly, typically like rankings comparison between myself and my co-host Brad. He also publishes his rankings on fullpresscoverage.com, so you can also compare for yourselves. But we'll talk about some of our biggest differences in the rankings, and then like last week was all about trades. Like, we had to talk about all these different trades and effects on teams, right? So stuff comes up all the time that will, it's not just about the rankings debate every episode. We'll talk whatever topic is kind of pertinent to that week in fantasy. Packers Pod is just talking about Packers, so it's twice a week in season. One's a game recap. I usually do that solo Sunday after the game, and then in season, like during the week, I'll join my co-host Jesse, and we'll preview the upcoming game. Going for 2 live, I do a couple of live streams, one Sunday morning, mostly for start sits. So come if you have any start sit questions in fantasy football, come join us on the Going for 2 Live network Sunday mornings. Also have a Monday night pregame show that is more centered just on the Monday night game. We used to have a Dr. James Freddy, the fantasy sports doc on, so we would use that, actually a big chunk of that, to talk about injuries and like timetable expectations for players to come back. But Doc's so busy that he's no longer on the show anymore. So we've turned it to just basically being a Monday night prop show, picking against the spread. And so we'll, do a lot of that. I write articles for the FF League winners. That's also Packers centric. I do a Packers preview article every week going up against their opponent. And then Fantasy Six Pack. This is my baby, the goal line guide. So it's something I've been doing the last couple of years. And it's like a matchup comparison. It's a matchup based grading system for NFL offenses every week to try and find the likeliness of touchdowns. Because I don't know about you, JMark, but one of the things I hear a lot in fantasy football talk is, okay, we're trying to predict so many things, but touchdowns, people are afraid of. Oh, touchdowns are fluky. And then they leave it at that, right? There's not as much diving into trying to predict touchdowns. I think people are worried that it is so fluky. But I think not looking at it from a player perspective, from a team perspective, I think is a key. And then looking at which teams are likely to score touchdowns and then find the players on those teams. And that's what the goal line guide does. There's a grade for each team for their rushing attack and their passing attack. The higher the grade, essentially the more likely a touchdown is going to occur. But there's also the big marker is the difference between those two grades. That's where I find the edge. And those are the areas we should go to. A team with a higher passing grade, okay, target their receivers. That's a team where you might be willing to play their tight end. Oh, higher rushing grade, play that running back. So just simple things like that. But I've looked for that for years, and I finally, last couple of years, have found a system to it that I think operates fairly well. So if you want some touchdown projections or predictions, I suppose, check out the goal line guide on Fantasy Six Pack every week. So
make sure you check it out. It's also great for your anytime touchdown bets if you want to take a look at those. That's what I've looked at it for. And so check out Kyle at Senra Says. Thanks for joining the CFL pod. I know we've talked on old fashioned football, but it was fun talking Canadian football with you. And good luck to the Ticats in the off season. I can't say I guess good luck this weekend, but good luck.
I mean, it's funny. I was like, man, it's great to win. Like, it would have sucked losing to Calgary. They're the worst team. Like, you lose them twice. That sucks.
Yeah.
Really didn't enjoy that win as much as I should have, though, because it's super bittersweet on, man, this would have been nice when they were still alive in the playoffs.
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense. All right,
25, baby. Let's go for that Grey Cup.
There you go. Thanks for checking into the CFL Gambling Podcast. Be back tomorrow. And as Colby Dan always says, you better think about yours. And we out of here.